In the quiet hours of a late evening, when the lights of Madrid flickered against the night sky and the streets hummed with the sounds of distant traffic, Cristiano Ronaldo sat in his home, surrounded by the warmth of family. The soft laughter of his children echoed faintly down the hallway, a reminder of the life he had chosen and the love he had built with Georgina Rodriguez. For him, this was peace, the kind of peace money couldn't buy. But as his phone lit up on the table beside him, that fragile stillness began to tremble. A name appeared on the screen, one he hadn't expected to see again so suddenly. Irina Shayk. For a moment, Ronaldo froze. The name pulled him into a storm of memories, moments they once shared, and choices that had shaped the path of his life. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Why now? Why after all this time? Something inside him whispered that this was no ordinary call. With a slow, deliberate breath, he answered. Her voice came through, low but urgent, carrying a weight he could not ignore. "Cristiano," she said, "I need to see you. It's important. More important than you can imagine." There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness of the past, only a strange sincerity that caught him off guard. For a man like Ronaldo, who had spent his life making decisions under pressure, this moment felt heavier than a penalty in the Champions League final. He asked no questions, gave no resistance. Something in her words compelled him to agree. "Where?" he asked simply. The address she gave was a private estate on the edge of the city, far from the noise of cameras and the world that constantly watched his every move. Within an hour, Ronaldo found himself steering his sleek black Rolls-Royce through the narrow roads, his mind restless with curiosity. When he arrived, the gates opened silently, revealing a villa bathed in golden light. Irina stood there waiting, her presence as commanding as ever. Time had not dimmed her elegance, nor the quiet intensity of her gaze. But there was something else in her eyes tonight, something heavier, almost desperate. He stepped out of the car, his tall frame casting a long shadow under the estate lights. For a long moment, they said nothing, only staring at each other as if measuring the years gone by. Then, without warning, Irina gestured to the driveway, and there it was, a masterpiece of engineering and design, shimmering under the lights like a jewel forged by gods. The Bugatti Tourbillon, a machine so rare, so unimaginably expensive, it seemed more fantasy than reality. Its curves were sculpted perfection, its polished surface reflecting every spark of light. Worth nearly $4.6 million, it wasn't just a car. It was a statement, a temptation, a weapon of persuasion. Irina's voice broke the silence. "This is for you." For the first time in years, Ronaldo felt a genuine shock ripple through him. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the machine. The Bugatti emblem gleamed proudly on the hood, a crown atop a chariot built for legends. He knew cars. He loved cars. His collection was already one of the finest in the world. But this was beyond even his standards. Yet, as his fingers brushed the air near its polished frame, he didn't feel excitement. He felt danger. He turned to her, his jaw tightening. "Why?" Irina met his gaze without flinching. "Because there are things between us that were never finished. Because there's something I need you to hear, something that matters more than anything you've ever driven, more than money, more than pride. And if this is the way I can bring you here, then so be it. Take it, Cristiano. It's yours." For a man who had grown up with nothing, who had fought tooth and nail to rise from the dusty streets of Madeira to the pinnacle of world football, this would have once been irresistible. A $4.6 million Bugatti handed to him without hesitation. But Ronaldo wasn't that boy anymore. His eyes narrowed, and a silence stretched long enough to feel like eternity. Then, with a voice steady and unwavering, he said the words that stunned her. No, it was instant, without pause, without hesitation. A rejection as powerful as any goal he had ever scored. He didn't even glance back at the car again. Instead, he took a step back, his heart already pulling him elsewhere. Irina's eyes widened, not with anger, but with something like sorrow. She had expected resistance, but not this. She had believed the weight of the gift would at least spark a moment of temptation. But Ronaldo's loyalty to Georgina was unshakable, carved deep into his soul. Without another word, he turned. His footsteps echoed against the stone driveway as he walked back toward his Rolls-Royce. The Bugatti remained behind, untouched, a monument to the test he had just overcome. As the engine roared to life, Ronaldo's thoughts drifted not to Irina, not to the gleaming car, but to home, to Georgina. To the woman who had stood by him in moments darker than the cameras ever saw, who had given him love not for his fame, not for his wealth, but for the man he was when the stadium lights went dark. When he returned home, Georgina was there, waiting. The moment he stepped inside, her eyes searched his face, as if she already knew something had tested him that night. And when he drew her close, holding her in a silence filled with more meaning than words could carry, Ronaldo knew he had made the only choice that mattered. Because in the end, the most expensive gift in the world could never compete with the priceless truth of loyalty, of love, of family, and somewhere, in the stillness of the night, the Bugatti tourbillon sat gleaming in an empty driveway, a reminder that even the greatest temptations crumble before the power of a man who knows where his heart belongs. The night after Ronaldo walked away from the gleaming Bugatti tourbillon was anything but ordinary. The city of Madrid seemed unchanged, the streets still buzzing with life, the stars still scattered like diamonds across the dark sky. But for Irina Sheikh, nothing was the same. She stood in the driveway of her villa, staring at the car that had failed to bend a man's will. The headlights of Ronaldo's Rolls-Royce had already faded into the distance, and with them, the faint hope she had carried in her chest. Irina was not a woman who begged. She was not a woman who lowered her eyes or surrendered to rejection. The world had adored her. Cameras had worshipped her beauty, and her name carried weight across continents. Yet, in the span of a few minutes, Ronaldo had reminded her of a truth she couldn't ignore. No amount of luxury could buy back the choices of the past. She walked slowly toward the Bugatti, her hand grazing its flawless metallic surface. It had been meant as more than just a gift. It was a symbol, a statement of what she thought might draw him closer again. But now, under the silence of the night, it felt like an artifact of defeat. A car worth $4.6 million meant nothing to a man who valued loyalty over desire, a man who had found in Georgina something no amount of wealth or beauty could match. Inside his home, however, Ronaldo was far from careless about what had happened. He sat in his living room, the soft glow of a lamp casting long shadows across the walls. His children were asleep, and Georgina sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his. She hadn't asked a single question when he walked through the door earlier that night. She hadn't needed to. The silence between them was filled with trust, the kind that didn't require explanations. But deep inside, Ronaldo's mind wandered. Memories of his years with Irina began to surface. Moments when their laughter had filled hotel suites, when their appearances together had commanded the flashing of every camera, when the world had looked at them as a perfect couple. Yet, behind the photo shoots and the red carpets, there had been cracks that widened with time, until the foundation of their bond gave way. He remembered arguments whispered in corridors, the loneliness that sometimes followed even when they were together, and the realization that love could not survive where hearts did not align. The breakup had been painful, yes, but it had been necessary. And now, with Georgina's steady presence beside him, he knew he had chosen the right path. But still, why had Irina called him after all this time? Why the Bugatti? Why now? As the clock ticked past midnight, Georgina finally spoke, her voice soft yet sharp with intuition. She tried to reach you again, didn't she? Ronaldo turned to her, surprised. Her eyes met his with unwavering calm. It wasn't jealousy he saw in her gaze, but certainty. The kind of certainty born from knowing someone's soul. Yes, he admitted. She called. She asked me to come. She tried to give me something. Georgina tilted her head slightly, studying him. And you refused. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She already knew the answer. Ronaldo gave a faint smile, the kind that carried both relief and admiration. I refused without thinking twice. I left it there, untouched. Her hand tightened gently around his. That's why you're mine? She whispered. But while their bond grew stronger in that moment, Irina's turmoil only deepened. Back at her villa, she sat alone with a glass of wine, the Bugatti gleaming silently outside like a phantom of her failure. She thought about the years she had spent with him, about the life that could have been. And though she was proud of her career, her achievements, her independence, there was a hollow ache inside her that whispered of unfinished stories. For her, the Bugatti had been more than a gift. It had been a message, a chance to rewrite something she thought was lost forever. Yet Ronaldo had shown her that not every story was meant to be rewritten. Some endings were permanent. Still, she wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The next morning, Ronaldo woke to the sound of his children's laughter drifting through the house. The sun spilled through the curtains, golden and warm, wrapping the home in a blanket of peace. As he joined his family at the breakfast table, He felt the weight of the previous night slowly lifting. But in his heart, he knew this was not over. Irina's voice, her urgency, her insistence. It had carried something deeper than a simple attempt to lure him back. And he was right. Because even as he poured himself a cup of coffee, Irina was on the phone with someone else. Someone powerful. Someone who would soon draw Ronaldo into a storm larger than a Bugatti, larger than a gift, larger than the echoes of an old relationship. The days that followed were quiet on the surface, yet beneath that calm, a storm was brewing. For Ronaldo, life had returned to its familiar rhythm. Rigorous training sessions at dawn, strategic meetings with his team, and the laughter of his children drifting through the halls of his home. Georgina was always nearby, her presence steady, a silent reminder of the life he had chosen. A life of loyalty, love, and unwavering trust. To anyone watching, it seemed perfect, unshakable, untouchable. But the human heart is never so easily contained. Irina Shayk, meanwhile, was a storm in motion. The Bugatti tourbillon gleamed in her driveway like a sentinel of her failed attempt, its polished curves reflecting the city lights as if mocking her. She could not forget the instant Ronaldo had refused it, the way he had turned away without hesitation. That rejection lingered, sharp and insistent, in her mind. She had believed the car, an extravagant, $4.6 million masterpiece, might be enough to stir even the steeliest resolve. But Ronaldo's loyalty to Georgina had proven far stronger than any temptation she could conjure. And yet, Irina was not a woman to concede easily. She was calculating, determined, and above all unafraid of bold moves. Sitting alone in her villa, her thoughts spinning like a tempest, she knew that the Bugatti was only the beginning. She had underestimated the depth of Ronaldo's attachment to Georgina, but she had also underestimated the scale of what she had come to reveal. There was a reason she had called him, and it had nothing to do with wealth, luxury, or the fleeting allure of a car. Something much larger was at play, something that could change everything if handled correctly. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message that made her pulse quicken. A cryptic reminder from someone she trusted only partially. "Time is running out," it read. Her eyes narrowed. That message was not a threat, but a warning. Ronaldo needed to hear what she had to say, and it needed to happen soon. Across town, Ronaldo went through his daily routines with a calm precision that belied the turbulence beneath. His mind wandered, despite his focus, to Irina's call. The intensity in her voice, the urgency, the way she had insisted on meeting him. It all gnawed at him. He recalled fragments of the past, moments that had seemed insignificant then but now carried weight. The shared laughter in sunlit hotel suites, the whispered arguments in empty corridors, the fleeting nights when the world had seemed theirs alone. Memories that were tinged with nostalgia yet sharpened by reality. And still, Georgina's presence was a constant anchor. She sensed, as if intuitively, that something had occurred, though she did not press for details. When she met his gaze over breakfast, there was a quiet understanding. A glance, a touch, a simple nod. This was enough. Her faith in him never wavered, and Ronaldo had no desire to shake it. Yet he knew Irina would not stop. He could feel it, deep in his bones, the subtle signs of a force gathering beyond the ordinary. The call, the car, the mysterious urgency. It all pointed to something bigger. Something that would test not only his loyalty but his instincts, his judgment, and the foundation of the life he had worked so hard to build. Irina, meanwhile, plotted her next move with calculated patience. She studied Ronaldo's habits, the timing of his appearances, the moments when he was most accessible. Every detail mattered. Her eyes lingered on a photograph of the two of them together years ago, a reminder that the past could never fully be erased. She whispered to herself, a vow carried on the quiet night air. He will listen. He has no choice but to hear me out. As the sun set on another day, casting long shadows across the city, Ronaldo stepped onto his balcony, looking out over Madrid with a contemplative gaze. The wind tugged gently at his hair, the distant hum of traffic a soft reminder of life's rhythm. But he felt a tension he could not shake, an invisible pull toward a confrontation he had not anticipated. Irina's call had opened a door, and though he had closed it with his refusal, he knew it would not remain closed for long. The tension mounted as night fell. In the quiet of her villa, Irina prepared herself, reviewing her words, her plans, and the stakes. She was not offering another car. This was no longer about material temptation. The stakes were higher, emotional, personal, and far-reaching. She would give Ronaldo the choice he could not refuse, the revelation that would make him question everything he thought he knew. Back at his home, Ronaldo settled into the quiet of his living room, Georgina beside him, his children asleep. He thought about loyalty, about choices, about the moments that define a man. He thought about Irina's past presence in his life and the enduring power of memory. And though he knew the coming days would challenge him in ways the world would never see, he felt a quiet confidence. Because no matter what Irina presented next, no matter the scale of the revelation or the seduction of wealth or glamour, Ronaldo had made one choice clear. His heart belonged to Georgina and to the family they were building together. Yet, the night held secrets, and in the shadows, Irina prepared to reveal hers. The true reason for her sudden reappearance, the explanation behind the expensive gift, and the hidden truths that had remained buried, all were about to come to light. And when they did, Ronaldo would face a decision far greater than rejecting a car. He would have to confront the past, the present, and a future that could twist in ways no one anticipated. Irina Sheikh, far across the city, was a figure consumed by a storm of her own making. The Bugatti Tourbillon, its metallic surface gleaming under the villa's lights, remained untouched, a monument to failure, but her mind was far from still. She sat in the study of her villa, a glass of wine cradled in her hand, swirling gently, the deep red reflecting the fire she felt within. The car had been only the opening act, a symbol meant to lure, to tempt, to test. Its failure did not bring despair. It ignited determination. She would see him again. She had to dot. Irina's thoughts drifted, pulling her back to the early days of their relationship, to a time when the world seemed infinitely wide and full of possibilities. She remembered the nights when Ronaldo's laughter had filled silent hotel suites, the whispered arguments in corridors no one else could hear, and the fleeting moments of intimacy that had felt sacred. There had been passion, certainly, but also tension, the friction of two ambitious souls colliding in a world that demanded perfection. She recalled the jealousy, the misunderstandings, the choices that seemed small at the time but had rippled outward, shaping destinies. And now, years later, those ripples had returned to confront them both. Ronaldo, meanwhile, could not shake the sense that something was approaching, that the past he thought resolved was stirring, seeking recognition. He remembered evenings when he had wrestled with his own desires, balancing fame and personal life, the weight of expectations pressing against every choice. He recalled moments of temptation, the allure of what could have been, and yet, in every instance, the anchor of loyalty had kept him true. Georgina was that anchor now, the steady presence against which all other distractions paled. And still, Irina's call had stirred a curiosity, a subtle acknowledgement that some doors, once opened, cannot simply be closed. Throughout the day, Ronaldo's movements were deliberate. Training sessions demanded precision, yet his mind wandered, tracing patterns of the past, revisiting conversations with Irina that had seemed trivial but now carried the resonance of forewarning. Every interaction, every gesture, every tone from years ago played through his consciousness like a film reel, weaving together a narrative he had not realized remained unfinished. Georgina, ever perceptive, noticed the tension etched into his brow, the slight hesitations in his gait, the way his gaze lingered a moment longer on distant spaces. She did not question him aloud, for she understood that some battles must be faced silently, that trust is often proven not in words but in presence. Her hand brushed against his as he passed, a quiet, grounding gesture that spoke of faith, loyalty, and love. Ronaldo's chest tightened at the touch, a mixture of relief and recognition that no matter what awaited, this was his true home, the center of his life, and the woman whose heart he would defend above all else. Subscribe WSN for these type of audio stories. Listen Ronaldo Life Motivations.